Medieval Misadventures, Episode 9, Boulder and the Superstation. One day in the Kingdom of Sodor, Thomas was taking a goods train through Boulder Mountain and towards a big hill. But the coupling on the front car was weak, so when Thomas got to the top of the hill, the trucks broke away. And the trucks ran back towards Boulder Mountain, slid into a siding, smashed through the buffers, and crashed into the side of the mountain. Boulder was not very happy at being knocked off the mountain again. Soon, Thomas returned with Harvey to help clean up the mess. By the time they got there, Harold had already put Boulder back up on the mountain. "I'm sorry about the mess, Harvey," said Thomas. "It wasn't your fault, Thomas," said Harvey. "A rusty coupling could have broken for any engine." Harvey quickly set to work at cleaning up the trucks. Just then, on the other side of the mountain, a new engine pulled up. His name was Silver. He had the number 5 just like James, and he was pretty much the same class as James, but his paint was bright silver. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear," said Silver. "This looks like it could take a while to clean up." The mess did take a while to clean up, but soon the trucks were back on the rails, and Harvey was getting the broken buffers cleaned up. "Well, I guess I'll take my train away now," said Thomas. "You know, I'm actually surprised the building by the side of the line here didn't fall over in the accident." Spoke too soon. I'll get that once I'm done with the buffers." Thomas was about to couple up to his train so he could take it away, but just then Midnight, who was one of the newer engines on Sodor, came up the hill with some of the good trucks. He didn't know that the line was blocked up ahead and came racing down the hill. "Oh no, Thomas, look out!" cried Midnight. Thomas quickly ran into the siding and accidentally bumped Harvey and pushed his front wheels off the track. Midnight shut his eyes seconds before he crashed into Thomas's train. The train was pushed forward through the mountain and bumped Silver, knocking him off the track. To make matters worse, a log from one of Thomas's cars was thrown into the air and it smacked into Boulder's face. It then flew over the mountain and crashed down on Silver's boiler. "Ow!" cried Silver. "Hey, you scratched my paint!" But the trouble wasn't over yet. Boulder began to rock violently, and soon he slid off the backside of the mountain and knocked over the brake fan as he crashed to the ground. "Cinders and ashes!" cried Thomas. Thomas was still on the rails, but he couldn't get out the siding because the good trucks were blocking the points. So Harold quickly took off to get more help. More help soon arrived, and soon the mess was finally cleaned up. But Silver was very cross. "Look what that careless engine you call your friend did to my splendid silver paint," he said crossly. "Now, Silver," said Harold, "Midnight could not have possibly prevented himself from crashing into Thomas's train and spoiling your paint in the process. And your paint is the least of our worries." "How can you say that?" said Silver. "My paintwork is like my son." "Whatever," said Harold. And he spun his blades and took off into the sky, sending quarry dust everywhere, all over Silver's paint. "Hey, you dumb whirly bird, you're making my paint work even worse." "You're being overdramatic, Silver," said James. "I get upset when my paint work gets spoiled, but you're just being a little too, well, like I said, overdramatic." Silver had had enough and puffed crossly away. But it wasn't just Silver who was feeling very cross. "Every time I fall off the mountain, I have to get put back on it, and then I'm always knocked off again by another careless engine 2 seconds later. Someday, I will make all those engines pay for the number of times they've knocked me off the mountain. The steamworks was busy with a few engines needing repaints or repairs. Rosie, are you sure you want to keep waiting here for your new coat of red paint? Asked Victor. I'm sure you can come back another time when we have more red paint ready. I'm not leaving the steamworks until I'm painted red, said Rosie, and I would have been red a long time ago if that clumsy crane hadn't knocked over all the red paint cans. Hey, I'm not clumsy, said Kevin. Whoa, watch it, Kevin, said Scruff. Victor sighed. Very well, he said, but it's still going to be a while. I have a couple other engines here that need repairs, and it looks like we're getting another one right now. Thomas came in with Midnight to drop him off so he could be repaired. Then, Silver puffed up behind Scruff. Victor, he said, my paintwork has a nasty scratch. You must fix it right now. I'm pretty busy right now, Silver, said Victor. There are other engines here that have more urgent repairs to attend to, and your paintwork is the least of our worries. Silver wheezed angrily and began to puff away. Thomas, meanwhile, noticed Stanley. The steamworks crane was lifting branches off of Stanley's boiler. What happened to you, Stanley? Asked Thomas. Why are there branches and leaves all over you? This is the price you pay of spending the night in the Great Waterton Forest, said Stanley. In fact, this is the price I pay every night. Stanley's right, said Lady. He can't keep sleeping in the Great Waterton Forest every night. He needs to have a shed soon, so he won't get branches on his boiler every day. Thomas sighed. Well, we don't have much space around for new sheds, unless there was some chance that a shed was built on some supports and stood high up in the air. That actually sounds like a good idea, Thomas, said Ryan. Yeah, I agree, said Midnight. And soon all the engines were talking at once about Thomas's new idea for these sheds that could stand up in the air. Silver could hear the engines talking outside the steamworks. Stupid nonsense, he muttered, and he puffed away to a nearby siding. When he puffed into the siding, he was very surprised to see Boulder laying off to the side of the buffers. What are you doing all the way over here? Asked Silver. You're a bit of a distance from the quarry. They decided to move me to a different hilltop so that I'm not always falling on the tracks at the quarry, said Boulder. So what are those engines talking about in the steamworks? They're starting to talk about this idea that Tom's is getting about some new sheds that could stand on supports and be lifted into the air. Something like that. Just then, Boulder thought of something. This hilltop that I'm going to be moved to is near a big empty space where there could be room for sheds, especially ones that could be built up on supports, he said. Why are you so interested in this? Said Silver. It seems silly if you ask me. Come a little closer, said Boulder. Silver inched closer, and Boulder whispered something. Silver smiled. I think we should go through with this idea of sheds being built in the air on supports, said Scruff. Well, said Proteus, that does seem like a good idea, but it would take a lot of work and we're down a few engines. I think it's a great idea, said Silver as he puffed up. And I will gladly help with the construction. Oh, really? Said Stanley. I'm surprised to hear that from you, because construction work is messy work that could get your paint dirty or scratched up even more. I know, said Silver, but I still think it's a good idea, and I want to help this idea come to life. Proteus and Lady looked at each other. Very well, said Proteus. Starting tomorrow, we will begin the work on the new superstation sheds. The next morning, Boulder woke up at the top of his new hilltop and looked down and see several engines on the tracks below, making their plans to build the new superstation sheds. Silver looked up towards Boulder and winked at him. Guys, said Silver, if it's not too much trouble, I would think maybe we should put a little track up on the top of that cliff there, just so that when the construction is going on, one of us can keep an eye on the construction from up there and make sure everything's going alright. Okay, said the engines. After a few weeks of hard work, the superstation was almost complete, and it looked splendid. There were steep tracks on both sides for engines to race down on. There were even some tracks on the top of the shed for engines to be placed on for the night, and there was a crane on the top too that looked like Cranky and said Cranky too, but his name was actually Crank. They had just made a mistake on his nameplates. There was also an oil depot, a water tower, and a coal hopper down below, as well as some extra sheds on the ground. Good job, everyone, said Thomas. Tomorrow we'll finish up. We just have to put the new helipad on top of the shed, as well as the hoist for Crank to hold to lift engines up onto the top of the sheds. Okay, Melissa, let's go get a good night's sleep, said Dennis. We've got a big day tomorrow, finishing up the superstation and then holding the grand opening. Good night, everyone, said Paxton. Good night, Paxton, said Thomas and Frankie. Thomas finished filling up on water and they set off for home. Good night, Silver, called Thomas. You've been a great help to this project. Silver puffed up to the edge of the slope and looked over towards Boulder. The engines had built a track on the cliff next to Boulder's new hilltop for engines to come along and look at the superstation. Silver made his way onto the upper track and puffed over to Boulder. You've done very well so far, Silver, said Boulder. Thank you, said Silver. So, what do I do next? Tomorrow morning, I want you to get up early and invite some guests to the grand opening of the superstation. Of course, Boulder. And Crank? Yes, Boulder, called Crank the crane. Here is what I want you to do. The next day, the superstation was finally finished. The helipad was installed, Crank had his new hoist, and that evening the engines held the grand opening celebration. Several of them were on the tracks down below, and Thomas was going to be the first one up the completed track. Here it goes, said Thomas, and he rushed towards the slope. He made it to the top in no time. This superstation is amazing, cried Thomas. Yes, it is, came Boulder's voice. Too bad none of you will ever get to stay here. Ha 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 ha. Whoa, Diesel, Baron, Jetson. Ha 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 ha. You. And don't forget about us. Ha 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 ha. Whoa. Yeah. Haha. Whoa. Then, all of a sudden, Diesel bumped into Thomas and pushed him onto Crank's hoist. Crank then raised his hoist and then slightly lowered Thomas over the side of the track, hundreds of feet below the ground. No, no, don't drop me. Put me back on the tracks, cried Thomas. I'll save you, Thomas, cried Frankie. Oh, no you don't, said Randall as he knocked Frankie's front wheels off the track. This superstation is now our lair, said Boulder. I suggest you all get out of here, or else your number one falls to the ground, and then I'll even roll off the mountain and crush him like a tin can. Oh, no, 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 no. The engines were horrified, but there was nothing they could do. The ways up to the superstation were blocked by Randall and Diesel. Boulder clearly had the upper hand. Fine, shouted Proteus. You win. The superstation is yours. Just let Thomas go. Oh, I'm sorry, said Boulder. Did I say anything about releasing Thomas? No, I don't think you did, said Baron. Yeah, said Boulder. I think we'll just hold on to him for safekeeping. And Crank raised his hoist even higher. He then swung his arm around, then the other way, and Thomas was thrown from the hoist and went crashing into the back of Boulder's mountain. Thomas, cried Frankie. Now all of you get out of here, now, shouted Diesel. And the engines left at once. Wait, Silver, where are you going? Silver, cried Crank. Come join us up here, my buddy. What? Ugh. Get comfortable, boys, shouted Boulder. This is gonna be your new home for a while. And by a while, I mean forever. And this is just the beginning, shouted Silver. Sodor will never be the same again.